bump their rent to $1.50 per month.
And in that instance, it's a heck of a deal for the tenant because, you know, from the tenant's perspective, then, you know, but, you know, if you're having to spend that money up front, it's not such a great deal for you.
No.
See, and that's the thing.
Is that where we put our discount rate in there? Because we want to know what it's really.
Yeah, because, you know, technically you should be, even if it's cash, you should be earning some money off of that cash because your alternative would have been able to take that $50,000 and just stick it in a savings account earning a couple of %, you know, worst case scenario. And so that's where that should have been factored in.
Now I would factor it in just like this example.
Yeah, instead of using 14%, you use like 2% or whatever.
That would tell you what it's worth.
Right.
Okay, assuming you're.
In other words, you just would, because what you did was you gave them the full value of the 50,000. Whereas really you should have probably given them maybe more like 40,000. Or
we even cut it a little bit. We made it even sweeter deal if we really want them, so we just kept sweetening it up.
Well, sometimes it's what you have to do. And there's no like complete absolute right and wrong. It's more of looking at it from the perspective of are you accurately reflecting all of your costs as the owner of the property? Because in one sense, that's kind of almost like lost revenue.
Right.
In one sense, you could also even look at it as it's a rental concession. And, you know, so you just want to make sure that
you want to see it and then make your decision.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and the smaller the player is in the market, you know, the less sophisticated they're going to probably be on that sort of stuff. The larger the player in the market, that sort of stuff, they're going to nickel and dime every possible angle.
And you want those guys who get the highest credit.
Right.
It's a catch-22.
Is it warm in here, or is it just me?
Is it what?
I wonder if we can do that in there. We'll ask the security guard. I'll make it long.
I'll make it 2 goals. That's what happens. You go from one extreme to
Is
the
this
other.
here, or is it?
Throwing gym shorts.
Going cozy today.
Bowling around. Is it on? I'm hearing
Oh, you don't
something.
think it's on?
Oh, that's the
projector.
That's the projector. It is on, or?
Oh, yeah.
Are we doing that project next?
It's not up there. Okay. It comes on. Blowing us out back here.
Okay. 'Cause I'm sweating bullets up here.
You gotta come walk back here, Doctor.
All day Saturday.
Okay, now, do we want to talk about how we're going to structure it first?
Yeah, we'll talk when we at lunch or after class today.
Have you looked into it, we're going to have it.
I just wanted to let you know. I'm recording for
Oh, okay.
You should probably.
Well, I did. I was like, with you. No, I don't know. I got out of the car. I got out of the car. So I was listening.
Daryl just said that reality check, man. It was born in 1999. I graduated high school.
I think I have seen it. My sister's
My issue was
yeah, I saw like
I just got up with them 2 days ago. They FedEx lost both my brothers. They found it, but
yeah, but
I just
they're
got
like
it.
real houses where
I'll start reading this.
yeah, I saw this one where they built this like giant boardwalk going down to it.
All right.
Yeah, it was a little crazy, but
Yeah.
we could travel.
You did?
They did not.
I did.
Where you go?
I actually had to come drive over here on Wednesday and picked up, we went to cars for the property.
Okay.
We got an F-150.
We don't have class on February 7th.
I drove Range Rover. That's for our sales team, we have 3 of them. Yeah, so, but I had to drive all the way over, spend the day, filling out paperwork and
On all the addendums, nothing was in.
That's correct. That's the mid-semester or mid-term.
Okay.
So there's no site visit that day, no?
No, there's nothing on February 7th. I don't remember the second.
Thursday, Friday.
Okay.
This is it brutal? I want to make sure I didn't.
And normally, the way they do them is kind of like your, like 4 or 5 Saturdays on, the one off, and then on again for 4 or 5 Saturdays. But it just depends on where they kind of choose to break it up. Things happen kind of toward the beginning, sometimes in the middle, sometimes toward the end.
So what's going to happen in the fall?
Then we will be, instead of 10-week classes, it'll be 8-week classes. It's really the only, yeah, not a whole lot else is. Well, sort of. It's just like, for example, like this class, instead of it being from 8 until 2, it'll be from 8 until 5. But it'll be 4 weeks instead of 5 weeks. So I mean, really, you're not going to be going anywhere. It's more of a shifting of. It'll actually be plainer in the sense that you will only have 2 classes at any given time. You'll have 2 classes in the first 8 weeks, 2 classes in the second 8 weeks.
More 8 weeks?
Yeah, that's
More periods.
it could be helpful. Thanks for doing that now.
Well, it's, you can't because the way the system is set up in the quarter
So
system.
like a couple of semesters ago, like tough with like everything due at the same time.
Look,
Hey,
unfortunately, I can't schedule it precisely the way, because what I would prefer you do is actually 5 weeks or 4 weeks, whatever it is, per course, but sequentially, so that you're focused 100% on that one course at a time. But they won't allow us to do that.
That would be great. It's crazy.
Okay, all right.
Keep it in the right time and that way you can go on the train. Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. Let's talk here for just a couple minutes. All right. So at this point, theoretically, you should have, over the past couple of weeks, gone through using the Dropbox account, taking a look and worked through the Appendix 1 sort of questions and probably this Chapter 4 questions, the fixed rate mortgage questions, and that is what you should have been or should have done up to this moment in time. And all the videos, once again, are all there that have all that information all worked out, ready for you to go. Okay? Yes?
That's something I didn't know, that's something we should do after every class.
Yeah, in this particular instance that what I mentioned last week, you need to go through all the videos and all the problems, then you should have done that. And that will hopefully, get you to the point of where you're comfortable using the calculator, kind of being able to sort of read and interpret these kinds of problems, because these are the kind of problems that you're going to see on the midterm. Okay? The only new material that we're going to start right now is to focus on the adjustable rate mortgages, okay? And the different types of products that are associated with adjustable rate mortgages. And then that will be, once we finish that, that is the new material, and all the material that will be on that first midterm. Okay, make sense?
Like a study guide for the midterm?
Well, yeah, I've given you the old midterm, it's on Dropbox, everything's there, okay? Just need to take the time to look at it. Okay, now, okay, this point, hopefully, you understand the basics of some of the time value of money things. You understand how to do the basic fixed rate mortgage calculations that we've been through, the calculation of discount points, not only today, but also a couple of weeks ago. We went through prepayment penalties a couple of weeks ago, went through ongoing sort of administrative fees a couple of weeks ago. So all of that, my assumption is at this point, you are familiar with, okay? What you need to do though is make sure that you're going through both the old midterm as well as those sample problems that I put up there. Don't wait until 1 or 2 days before the test to try to do all of this. You're not going to get it done. It's the sort of thing you need to spread it out over, the next couple of weeks. If you haven't gotten started, you're already behind. So you need to make sure that you kind of spread that out, because it's going to take you, a couple of hours each day to kind of, work through some of those to kind of get comfortable with it. Some of you it's going to come really quick, others of you it's going to take a while, okay? So just sort of realize that. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to sort of jump in to the new material, adjustable rate mortgages, or also called variable rate mortgages.
Are we solving any problems from the book or just go by what you have?
You can. I mean, there are problems in the book as well, but these are just like the ones in the book. Okay? All right. What I asked you to do was to, in terms of the reading, my opinion is you can do the reading before or after we cover the material. I'm not one of these folks that expects you to have read it before you come into class, but yet I think what personally works best, and everybody has their own opinion about this, is I think if you sort of come in, you listen to what I have to say, and you understand kind of what's going on, and then you go and read it, it's going to make a lot more sense. Okay? If you just read it cold turkey, you're going to be sitting there and kind of struggling and falling asleep and that sort of thing, but hopefully, if you read it after the fact, there's a chance that a lot of the lights are going to go on, and you're going to draw the connections, and it's going to make much more sense to you, and ultimately be able to do it. And if you've got questions as you have read the material, certainly we can, we're more than happy to answer any of those as we sort of go along. Okay. For many years, mortgages, both residential and commercial, were pretty much exclusively fixed rate, fixed term sort of mortgages. Somewhere probably in the 1970s, because of technology to a certain extent, we introduced, and because we had interest rates that were way out of control and really variable, we introduced this notion of adjustable rate mortgages, so that over your mortgage term, your interest rate could go up, it could go down, depending on the variability within the market. Now, part of this was meant to be kind of a hedge for the lenders. But it was also, kind of a situation of where you as the borrower, if you thought interest rates were going to be going down in the near-term future, you could get an adjustable rate mortgage and just not have to refinance your loan every single time there was an interest rate drop. But on the flip side, it also worked to your disadvantage in the sense that if you thought interest rates were going to go up, it probably didn't make a whole lot of sense for you to get an adjustable rate mortgage. Okay? But think about it from the lender's perspective. Okay? Their perspective is, for the most part, just the opposite of yours. So if lenders are thinking that interest rates are going to be going up, they're going to want to push people into adjustable rate mortgages. Because here's the thing. If you typically, historically, look at what the stated current adjustable rate mortgage rate is, it is lower than the stated normal fixed rate mortgage. Okay? Now, in this weird environment we are in today, not so much. Because we have such ridiculously historic fixed rate mortgages, okay? So right now, not a whole lot of interest in adjustable rate mortgages, okay? Now, many years ago, not that many, but let's say 5, 10, 15 years ago, yeah, a lot more interest in adjustable rate mortgages, but I want you to understand, because we're going to see them again. I don't have any doubt about it. You're going to see the emergence of these things all over again. So here's how they would work. All right, we start out, let's say, with a $100,000 loan. And let's say that, once again, this is 12 payments per year. And our initial interest rate, just for fun, 10%. And the term is for 30 years. and we calculate our initial monthly payment, and we should get $877.57. Of course, I know that by heart because it's the standard example you use. Okay. So with that, that would be our standard, normal, sort of fixed rate mortgage. We're making the assumption that 10% is going to last for the entire 30 years. But what happens if we know the interest rate is going to change, and the interest rate is going to go, let's say, down after 2 years? Okay? So let's just, we can set this scenario up a variety of ways, but I'm just going to say, okay, for years 1 to 2, the interest rate is going to be at 10%. Years 3 to 5 is going to be at 8%. And I want you to calculate the effective cost of borrowing on this loan. Okay, now what we're going to be doing, I mean, on a super simple basis, all we're really saying is we know the interest rate or effective cost of borrowing is going to be what? Somewhere in between 8% and 10%, yes? Okay, but if we want to know precisely what that effective cost of borrowing is going to be, then we're going to have to do the calculation. So let's just sort of, I want to show you the methodology to do the calculations, and the way to think about adjustable rate mortgages is every time, write this down, every time your interest rate changes, set it up as a new problem. That will save your bacon, okay? Every time the interest rate changes, set it up as a new problem. All right, so the first thing we need to do with this particular problem, for that first 2 years, we need to calculate what our balance on the loan is going to be at the end of that 2 years. Okay, so you tell me, how are we going to do that? One input, what?
24.
24, excellent. Okay, shift, amortize, equal, 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 to get our balance. Okay, so let's do that real quick. Okay, 98,830.04 rounded. Okay, everybody get that?
Yep.
Okay, make sure that your calculator is set to 12 payments per year. Make sure the begin mode is not on. I told you to set it.
I can clear all.
No, that is the one thing that clear all does not cure.
I looked at it, it says beg on the bottom. I was like,
Yeah, that's what it is.
How do you get rid of that?
Once again, you hit the shift and then begin in mode key again.
All right.
Okay.
There it
If
is.
you review the videotape, I have the evidence that I said that, okay? Trust me. You just missed it. All right. So that is our balance at the end of the 24 months. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to drop the interest rate to 8%. So what did I say about every time the interest rate changes? Set up as a new problem. So clear everything out. So do clear all. And now what's going to happen is 98,830.04 is going to be our new loan amount. Okay, everybody comfy cozy with that?
Yeah.
Our interest rate is now going to be 8%. Now this is, once again, this is where I'll tell whether you're paying attention or you're asleep at the wheel. What is our term?
30, dude.
No.
25 through.
No,
Oh, 28.
28. We have paid 2 years, so it's no longer 30, we have 28 years remaining.
Right.
Okay, Tyler, you're giving me that face.
Okay, yeah,
So,
can you break that down again?
all right.
I got it. Because we're doing the.
In other words, for years 1 and 2, we had an interest rate of 10%. All right? We have found our balance at the end of that 2 years, so we're treating it as if it's a new loan at the end of 2 years, meaning that we now have effectively 28 years remaining. In other words, we started with 30, we've paid off 2, we're now left with 28 remaining.
I was jumping the gun and doing the amortization thing.
Okay, so 28. And we have to solve for a new payment.
I got 738.
Okay, let's double check. Okay, yep, 738.02. You were correct, sir. And now we do the amortization for,
Yes, 3.
but hold on, before you.
Is this the 25 through
Oh,
the?
It is a new problem,
Right.
okay?
Change.
So therefore, this really, instead of years 3 through 5, is now 1 through 3. Okay, because you're sort of starting over again. Okay? Okay, so we sort of continue up here, do 1 input, shift, amortize, equal, 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 get our balance. Of 95,621.45. Okay, everybody with me? Yes, no, possibly could be.
Wait, why do we do 3 again?
Okay. In the first instance, this was for the first 2 years of the loan.
Right.
Okay? And if you remember, I said write it down. Whenever you have a change in interest rate, you're starting fresh as a brand new problem. Okay? And that goes toward everything. So that means you have a new loan amount, you have a new interest rate, and you have a new term. All 3 variables change. Okay? Because of the fact that, well, you have an adjustable rate mortgage.
So, and a question where this would apply is if you said, all right, the interest rate changes from 10 to 8 after 2 years, what is the ending balance after year 5? Is that something you would ask?
Absolutely. But we're not done.
Oh.
We still haven't calculated what the effective cost of borrowing is. Okay? And this is the part where it gets hairy. Okay? Now, here is the way we need to think about this. Once again, this is the logic. From a cash flow perspective, we typically are going to be looking at this, we can look at it from the borrower's perspective, we can look at it from the lender's perspective. Normally we're going to look at it from the lender's perspective to sort of see what their effective yield is, the lender's yield. Now this is also a term that gets used interchangeably. You will hear me use the term lender's yield, you'll hear me use the term effective cost of borrowing. You can use them basically interchangeably, they're really pretty much the same thing. Okay, it's just that technically the lender's yield is looking at it from the lender's perspective, the effective cost of borrowing is looking at it from the borrower's perspective, but for the purposes of the calculations, it's really the same. Okay, so if we look at this from the lender's perspective, what has happened? At time period 0, they gave you $100,000, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, you made payments to them for 24 months of $877.57, yes?
Yes.
From their perspective, all of this stuff here really doesn't matter. What matters is their cash flow changed from $877.57 to $738.02 for the next 36 months, correct? At the end of that 36 months, the loan was paid off of the 95,621.45. So that becomes the reversion value to the lender, or in other words, the amount of money they receive back whenever the loan has been paid off. Does that make sense, yes or no? So those are the only numbers or cash flows that matter whenever we go to set up the return calculation, okay? We have to do all this other stuff to get those numbers, but now we have to separate them out. Okay, so what we're going to do is as follows. So 12 payments per year, clear all, and then we start off with 100,000, and this is now going to be a cash flow to the lender. Okay, and specifically cash outflow to the lender. Then for the first period of time, they're going to be receiving $877.57 as the monthly payment for 24 months, which we now use that 24 in sub J, okay, which tells us that happens 24 times. Then we get the cash flow of $738.02 for 36 months. Well, not really, but we're gonna, okay. And then we have the payoff, and we're making an adjustment here, 95,621.45. Well, I'm purposely doing that to make a mistake. You're catching it, but I want to point it out because this is the mistake you're going to make. Okay? And then after you do all of this, then you're going to solve for internal rate. Don't put this in your calculator yet. Internal rate of return for the year. Now, Robert's already found it. What's the mistake?
Added an extra month of payment.
Well, not so much an extra, well, what we've done is as follows. We haven't, if we look at this on a timeline, okay, we get down and what really is happening in that final month, that 36th month, is that we really should be making this payment and our final 738.02 payment. Okay? So what we need to do is we need to make a little adjustment, change this from 36 to 35, and then we need to add the 738.02 to our final payment or our basically loan payoff of the 95,621.45 as our final cash flow to the lender. Does that make sense, everybody? Yes or no?
Yes.
Because that is the reversion. It's just a timing thing, because if we had done it as I originally had it written, what the assumption would have been, we would have made our final payment of the 738.02 at the end of that 36th month, and then in the 37th month, this payoff would occur.
Where the 35 is, shouldn't that be an N sub J as well?
Yes, it should be. Thank you for catching that.
And that would reduce the, that IRR, right?
In subject. Yeah. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, what was your question?
That would reduce the IRR if you did it the other way.
Yes, because it pushes it further out.
Okay.
Okay, so now we have the setup. Okay, so once again, from the lender's perspective or the borrower's perspective, we are just simply wanting to know the result of this, because what it's going to tell us is that is going to be our effective cost of borrowing for this loan. Okay, and so it should be something between 8% and 10%. If it's not, we did something wrong. 8.91. The only little thing you might want to insert a probably equal sign there, just so that it adds those two together. And 8.92 really, there we go. Okay? Make sense? Now, anything about that that you don't understand, logically?
So, putting in the 5-year payoff value, if you didn't put that and the loan was just, took its course, would the effective interest rate be the same?
No.
Okay.
It would lower, because what would be the case is that if the loan were to continue at 738.02 at that 8% interest rate for the remaining 30 years, then what you would see is that this interest rate would get closer to 8%.
Sure, that makes sense. So when asking what is the effective cost of borrowing, are we assuming from the question that the loan is paid off at the end of 5 years?
Because that was the assumption that I made.
Got it.
Yes, but, and that's the sort of thing that, yeah, you've got to sort of,
Assume.
well, you got to, yeah, ferret out from the question, and it'll be stated, assume the loan is paid off at, or it's not paid off, you know, those sorts of things. Yep.
But if you said, hey, you know, what's your effective cost of borrowing from, you know, in your first 5 years?
Yep.
Then it's sort of the same question without you actually stating
True.
it's being paid off, right?
True. Because ultimately, what would happen is in the subsequent
Need that
year,
balance.
I mean, if you want to really think about it in another way, is that really your effective cost of borrowing from year 3 forward is 8%. It's on those first 2 years, your effective cost, your borrowing costs are 10%. And it's just, you're sort of doing almost a weighted average
Yeah.
Okay.
of sorts, okay?
If you were to add, at the end of the 5 years, a service
Fee.
fee payment,
Yep, what you would do is you would just add that to this amount and then recalculate your internal rate of return, and then that would obviously boost up your overall cost of borrowing. The same way that if you were to add in loan origination fees at the beginning of all of this, that would be subtracted from this, which would mean less of an outflow to the lender, meaning more overall income to them. So, good insight, yes, Melissa?
Just, I'm not sure if I'm understanding it right. The reason that we're paying it off at the end is so that we can figure out what the interest rate is just during the first 5 years?
No, the reason why we're paying off at the end of 5 years is we're moving.
Okay.
Or we're getting a new loan from another lender, you know, there's some other, you know, potential motivation. It's not just for the fun of doing the calculation. There is, you know, but normally it's going to be, you're doing this for a couple different reasons. One is you're selling the property and you're moving. Another is you are wanting to refinance the property, and so you need to close out this loan and figure out, well, what was my cost of borrowing on this loan relative to what my new cost of borrowing is going to be on whatever subsequent loan that I might be able to get.
Okay. That's valuable.
Because one of the things that we're going to be also looking at is, does it make sense to refinance? Because, you know, a lot of folks, whether it's on the residential side or it's on the commercial side, every time they see a little minor change in the interest rate, woo, it's time to go refinance, you know, and that's not necessarily the case because, well, if you have a situation where you have a lender that requires no fees, no charges, and automatically allows you to refinance your property, then fine, refinance it. But that is like a unicorn. Doesn't usually exist, okay? So most of the time, you know, you're going to have to pay additional fees and charges to refinance the loan, which those additional fees and charges that you have to pay may not be really fully offset by the reduction in your payment. So those are, you know, things that you just simply need to be aware of. Okay? Questions? We all good?
do you mind just stating the problem initially, like, how would you
Okay.
put it all together like that?
So, so assume that you have a $100,000 mortgage at 10% for 30-year term, and the interest rate is going to be changed at the end of the second year for years 3 through 5 to 8%. What is your effective cost of borrowing for the first 5 years of the loan? Or something like that.
You're not necessarily assuming that you're gonna pay off the mortgage, you're just
Right.
getting at the, how much will it cost you at the end of the
Right.
year? Okay,
Okay,
yeah.
good.
What's that part at the beginning and end? Where's that play in this again?
This doesn't play at all in this one.
Say again?
Does not play in this problem at all.
Oh, it does not.
No, they still had it set that way from one of those previous problems. And what the issue was that whenever you clear out the calculator, you do the shift clear all, that's one thing it does not clear
You
out.
usually want to keep it at the beginning though, correct?
No, you usually want to keep it on the end.
Okay.
So if you see that word beg in the display, get rid of it. We don't like beggars, okay? Okay, moving forward. All right. So, what if we want to start looking at things maybe from a little bit of a different perspective? What if you're a developer and you've got an equity partner that potentially wants to loan you money, and but they also they want to serve as your lender, but they also want to participate in the cash flows associated with the property with regard to increases that may occur in the property's value. Okay? And so in other words, you can have, there's a variety of different types of mortgage products that sort of allow for lender participation. Okay? Key term. Lender participation. Now, yet again, don't allow the term lender to only conjure up images of that bank that's on the corner. Okay? A lender can be an individual. A lender can be a group of people, could be, you know, just pretty much anybody. So when we talk about lender participation, it could just be an equity partner. Okay? So think about it a bit more broadly. Now, it could also be that bank on the corner that normally a bank on the corner is precluded from, you know, some, you know, sort of investment activities and kind of keeping certain things separate, but barring all of that, the idea that we're going to sort of throw out here is as follows. And we can set the scenario up a variety of ways. So let's say that we've got a $100,000 loan, once again, 12 payments per year. And here's the deal that the lender is willing to cut with you. They're willing to give you below market financing or below market interest rate in exchange for the upside on the property's value. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Conceptually. So what are the, let's say the prevailing interest rate today on a loan is what? Let's say, you want to say like 4 or 5%?
4.5.
Okay, 4.5, let's just use 5. Keep it nice round numbers. Okay, 5%. And so we put that in as our interest rate, and let's say we make this a 15-year mortgage. So let's calculate our monthly payment. So $790.79 is our payment. Okay, but here's the deal. Because this lender wants to kind of participate in this deal, they're willing to give you a 2% loan. Okay. Lender will provide 2% loan in exchange for 50% of value increase from property at time of sale. At end of year 5. Okay? That scenario makes sense. Okay, just read that. Lender will provide you a 2% loan in exchange for 50% of the value increase from the property at the time of sale at end of year 5. Okay? Now let's just, for simplicity purposes, we make the assumption that the current value of the property is the full $100,000. In other words, we don't have any loan-to-value ratios that we're dealing with. We're just going to keep it simple, and they're loaning us the full value, full 100% of the property's value. Okay. So, if we got the normal market loan, it would be the 5% loan, and that would be our interest rate. However, with them, 2% would be the loan amount, and we want to recalculate what is our payment.
643.51.
Okay. All right. Now, just for fun, what's the difference between these two? $147.28. Everybody with me? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. So by virtue of doing this deal with the lender, we're going to be saving $147.28 over the next 5 years. Everybody with me? Yes? No? Possibly could be. Okay, now, just without getting overly crazy with the calculations, and just say, how much is that saving us in real dollars? Okay, as Anthony pointed out, sometimes you just want to see what is the actual dollar amount. So that's going to save us $8,836.86 over the course of that 5-year term. Everybody good with that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, at the end of 5 years, what's going to happen? We're going to pay off the lender, obviously whatever the mortgage balance is, and then we're going to sell the property. Whatever we sell the property for, they get 50% of that increase. Okay? So let's just do a little bit of the math on that. Okay? Okay, sale price at end of year 5 equals, let's say, $150,000. Okay, so they're going to get $25,000. Okay, in other words, the original value was $100,000, $50,000 profit. They get half of that, or 50%. So the lender is going to get $25,000. Okay, everybody good with that? Yes, no, possibly could be. Now, the simple question, and I made this one, it's pretty basic, should we do the deal with the lender? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, you're saying, yeah, who said yes? Somebody said yes.
It's more complicated.
Okay, well, on the surface, it looks like we probably should not do the deal with the lender. And the reason, on the surface, I'm not saying that even after we make it, and we make it more complicated, it won't be the same answer, but on the surface, because of this deal, we're saving $8,800, but at the end, we're gonna have to fork over 25 grand that we would have got to keep. Does everybody follow on that? Yes or no? Anybody not follow on that? Okay. So, what we want to do is kind of, we can approach this several different ways, but we can kind of see, well, how do we sort of set them equal, you know, to each other? So let's just see if even we can. So we clear everything out, and we put in 147.28 as a payment amount occurring 60 months, and then we have a cash outflow that we would potentially have to pay to the lender of $25,000 as our future value. And let's just calculate what would be the return. This is one way to look at it. Okay, so what does that basically tell it? What does that number potentially mean to us or to the lender?
The lender's getting the 37% return on it.
Effectively, yeah.
Instead of the 5%.
Because they're, in one sense, they're foregoing, the lender is foregoing $147.28 a month for 5 years. However, they are receiving $25,000 at the end of all of this, at the end of 5 years. So technically, their rate of return as the lender off of that deal is 37%. Now, if we just look at it from the perspective of, well, we got a lower interest rate. That helped us out during the course of that 5 years, that we didn't have to maybe generate as much income. We got to generate, you know, a little bit more profit for ourselves, you know, during that time period. And this is the key. Nothing is guaranteed with regard to what that resale price is going to be at the end of that 5-year period. Okay? In this instance, the lender got lucky. Okay? You know, what would have happened if the property, instead of selling for $150, only sold for, you know, $110? Then all of a sudden, not such a good deal for the lender. And I know where your questions are about to go, okay? You're probably going to ask me, well, who sets that selling price, or where does that selling price potentially come from in terms of how do you know, keep everybody honest, or if you choose not to sell it, or, you know, things like that. Well, typically, you're going to have a third-party appraiser come in most instances, to sort of arbitrate what that, you know, final number might be. Is that where you're going with the question?
That was part, yeah, that was part of it.
Okay.
What if it's valued at a lower than 100 grand?
If it's valued at a lower 100 grand, lender walks away with nothing.
So with the 110, it's a loss.
Do they contribute to the loss?
No, you're not.
No, in other words,
They just come to closing with money.
what, I'm sorry? Well,
You said you'd be happy, I said, no, you wouldn't.
I go, well,
You want to make money on the deal.
I know, but I don't want to give the bank.
well, see, and then also that begins to, but this is a fascinating thing though, because you're in it together.
Yeah.
50-50 split. You want it to make more money. You really do. As the borrower, it's not like you're not wanting it to make money. It's just that the more money it makes, the more money is going to go to your partner, the lender. Okay, so it's all a question of rewards, and this is when people talk about deal structure. This is the kind of thing that, you know, we begin to sort of play around with, is who gets what returns under what conditions and at what point in time, and, you know, all those sorts of things, you know, to where it begins to be very interesting, because every player may be looking for something a little bit different. Okay, we got a whole boatload of questions floating around up here, so we just sort of take them in. Okay, Alyssa, you go
I
first.
have a few sort of specific scenario situations. What would happen in a loan like this if you put in like an addition or something, and that was part of the reason for like.
If you put in I'm sorry.
Like an addition on a house, for example. So like you created, you know, value yourself. It has nothing to do with it. How would that?
Then more than likely what would be is that additional amount that you contributed up front would be potentially subtracted out.
Correct. And then with these loans, how would it work with refinancing? Would it be the value at the time?
The value at the time of the agreement that you struck with the lender, that at the end of that 5 years, that it's going to either trigger a sale or it's going to trigger a reappraisal of the property. Well, and potentially both in some instances.
Can you explain this part again, like what we're doing with the.
Yep, okay, so if you remember, the deal was with the lender, they're going to give you a favorable interest rate.
Right.
In this case, going from 5% to 2%. So that difference was a 147.28, okay? Meaning they are not receiving that money. The lender is not receiving that money. For 5 years or 60 months.
Right.
At the end of that 60 months, they are going to get the $25,000 from the value, 50% of the value appreciation off of the property. And so all we're doing is sort of calculating what is off of that portion of the deal, what is the lender receiving?
The portion of the 25?
Well, no, in other words, just off of that reduction in the interest rate,
Okay.
what is the impact to the lender? The lender is still, on top of this, is still getting a 2% interest rate off of you as well. Okay? But this is in addition to that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, actually, Fred?
Is this considered an equity partnership?
You can call it a lot of different things. In one sense, yes, it also can just simply be called lender participation. It can be called loan participation. It can be called equity participation. But yes, in this case, the lender is not really contributing any additional equity into the deal. They're just simply giving you a reduction in your cost of borrowing. Okay?
In lieu of getting some of your equity back.
Right.
No, this is usually a pretty sweet deal for the lender.
Can we flip this and look at the cost of borrowing, the effective rate of?
We can. Okay.
Or
Okay.
you look at it from a future value from the partner's perspective, like I'm gonna be saving $147 a month. What's gonna be what's the present value of that money for me? That's
right.
Should I, just flip it around? And
Yeah, we can. Okay. Well,
This is usually something though that the developer may not want to do just because, I mean, the lender gets the upside. Just basically they can participate in the profits and not share the risk with you if you're still hopeful.
well, they are sharing in a little bit of the risk. I mean, they are effectively, they are giving you a substantially lower cost of borrowing.
Right.
And they are taking the risk that at the end of 5 years, that property may only be worth, $100,000 for that matter, or less. And so in that circumstance, the borrower is still going to have to front up. I mean, for example, if the property were to sell for $75,000 at the end of all of this, you would still have to pay off the lender,
Right.
Whatever the balance on the loan is at the end of 5 years. So, from that standpoint, the lender's really not going to lose, except the real only loss that they're going to have is that 147.28, which is not insignificant. Is that okay?
Yeah, so whether it's a good deal or not is purely based on your risk tolerance and whether you need to hedge a risk or.
Right. Well, because a lot of times, because this can be twisted and contorted a gazillion different ways. But one instance that you may be looking at, and now granted, this is a small dollar amount on a small property. If we're talking about, though, millions of dollars, okay, we're going to build a new stadium, or we're going to build a new hotel, or we're going to build a new, you know, whatever it might be, you're saying, well, where could this come into play? Well, this could come into play that you take on a public sector partner. Like, for example, a local city government. But the city government says, we're going to issue bonds, city bonds, that are at a lower interest rate than the prevailing market-based bank interest rate is, and get you this cost savings, but we want participation on the back end of this deal, that whenever you potentially sell this property or this property gets reappraised 5 years from now, we want to cash in on that benefit. And you know, the savings that you are achieving over that first 5 years, you know, on millions of dollars, this, you know, number begins to be very real to you, especially if you know, it may make the difference between the project being successful or not successful by virtue of the cash flow it generates. Make sense? Because, you know, and that's the piece of the big reveal of this is the sort of thing that a lot of, that's exactly what you will see is with a lot of sort of public sector partner / lenders. This is the kind of situation that you may see is they may be able to get you that lower interest rate because their borrowing ability is better in most instances than yours might be. And may also, you know, another flip side, or another, not flip side, but another aspect to this is that we could have added as a condition of this is, and we sort of did by virtue of, I just didn't really get into it, there was no down payment required. So we have no money of our own equity in this deal whatsoever. So, you know, from that standpoint, it's just free cash flow, you know, free and clear. Make sense?
What's the likelihood of a loan like this happening now?
Oh, it's always, I mean,
Really?
especially with a lot of these public sector deals that, you know, the public-private partnerships, you know, have been around for many, many years. You know, they take a lot of different forms, but, you know, and, you know, there are a lot of moving pieces and parts to them. But, you know, like whenever the Dallas Cowboys Stadium was built in Arlington, Texas, there were all sorts of these kinds of special financing arrangements, you know, with the city of Arlington and other taxing jurisdictions that assisted in the acquisition of land, but also the overall cost of borrowing. Okay, so it's one of those sorts of things that it's, you know, if you can get a match between kind of your needs as the developer and the needs of the local government or state government, whoever it might be, you know, sometimes, you know, there are these weird opportunities that will emerge that, you know, allow for you maybe not to have to put in really much of your own equity, but there are going to be strings attached to it of some sort, and this is one example. Okay, other thoughts, questions?
Literally, can we flip it the other way?
Okay.
To what the cost of borrowing?
Okay. And you want it from the perspective of the borrower.
Yeah.
Okay. So, from their perspective, you're not going to be, well, actually your cost of borrowing in one sense is, since you're not putting in any equity, there's no real cost, there's no actual cost to you in terms of the, well, there's still cost on the loan, but in terms, there's no equity involved. Okay. So, but the cost of the loan, we have the 100,000. And so if we would have gone with the original scenario, which was 790, 79 for 60 months, but we would have had to have put a payoff amount in there. Really, it would be 59 months. And And so the final amount will be 790.79 plus the loan payoff. Okay,
So we gotta figure out the balance of the loan at that time.
we do. And that would be the cash flow, and starting it off just like this, we're gonna add to it, but starting it off just like that, if we put it in, then our cost of borrowing would be 5%, okay? But
Because we're also giving them the 25.
right, and that's what we can also factor that in as well, and we're going to. Just going to try to separate it out, keep it clean. And so the second scenario is the 643.51. For 59 payments. And so 643.51 plus whatever the payoff amount is, cash flow, and the IRR for that would be 2%. Okay? Now, what we have to do to make the adjustments in this particular case is, first of all, we've got to find out what the balance is on the loan in both instances. It'll work out to be both of these. However, what we've then got to do is we've got to look at how much money we would have received by virtue of the increase in value without having to pay the lender, and then look at how much money we would have received by virtue of having to pay the lender. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so in this particular instance, we are not paying the lender anything, correct? Okay, in this instance, we're gonna have to pay the lender an additional, what? 25 grand, correct? So that's gonna get added here. Okay, which is gonna drive up the cost of borrowing. But before we can do that, let's go ahead and get the balance of the loan at the end of the 5 years. So 100,000, 643.51. Payment, 2%. 480 months. Okay. And what shift times equal. The balance that I get is 69,936.37. Okay. So if we add all those up together, total payout to the lender would be $95,579.88. Okay, so now we can just work through, put that in. .87%. Okay?
So still, in this case, it still turns out to be better.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, in the sense that this is, yes, this is our effective cost of borrowing, still does not allow us over here to take into consideration what our true cash inflow is, because we would have to subtract out from that. Okay, let's just do it.
Yeah, we would.
We're there, we might as well just do it. Okay, so 100,000 plus or minus cash flow. Okay, so the balance on this one is 74,557.09. So what we would be doing here is, if we really wanted to, we could sort of say we're subtracting from this amount the full, well, and actually we've got to do,
I gotta add the 50,000 to that.
well, okay. Yeah, well, in this one, we're gonna get a full 50,000, but we're actually not having to pay the lender the 25,000. Is the way to look at it. So in one sense, we could just simply say, relatively speaking, we would subtract out 25,000 from this.
Okay.
You asked the question, Robert.
No, I'm all with it.
Okay, plus 790, 79, minus 25,000. So the net result would be 5347.
That looks like a loss though.
Well, whose perspective are we trying to look at this from? The reality of it is that our first calculation was the one that was the most important, which is, what is the lender going to be receiving?
Okay.
This one, yeah, it's telling us that, in essence, if a lender were to come to us and say, we're going to offer you a 7% loan, this would still be a good deal. If they were to offer you anything less than the 6.8% loan, then it's not a good deal. That's really what we're trying to say.
Assuming you know it'll sell at 150,000.
Assuming you know it'll sell at 150,000. Okay, but if we go back up there, we do that real quick, just to sort of see what we end up with. Since
It was a negative 0.8.
okay, because effectively we're getting more money back than what we're putting in, so it's going to be a negative return or negative cost of borrowing.
Yeah, so it's great.
Yeah, but it's not really realistic to look at it from that perspective. Okay. All right. Let's do this. Take another quick break and come back in about 5 minutes. Yep.
Okay, I'm looking at the midterm right now.
Yep.
Can you elaborate over the constant amortization question?
The what?
Number 2 on this question.
What is it?
One second.
Before you, can you go back for a bit, for a second?
Sorry.
That's just the balance of the loan after 60 months. So that's just going to be basically having all the loan information in and then putting in one input 60, shift amortize equal, that sort of thing.
Can I get a,
That's just your balance of the loan after 5 years. In other words, all we would have done is
Be there, but you never know. Because then the value.
That's how you figure that?
Yep.
Yeah, quick question for you. It looked like you solved the back. Did you solve it from the cash? Can you solve it from the cash flow?
No. 69,936.
Yeah, I think so. I have to check the.
So you can't
Don't
put in,
quote me, but I think.
you can't put in these numbers and then solve for this and then subtract out the payment to get this numbers? Or not?
No.
I tried to do it, it doesn't
No.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Doesn't
No.
work.
no.
Said no solution, actually,
Yep. No, you can't work, it doesn't allow you to solve for individual line items within the cash flow.
Okay.
You can't even,
remember, that's MIT and Harvard, like they have
you really can't even almost, you can sort of kind of do it in Excel, but it's tricky.
professional architects.
It's really, you have to, in order to do it, you have to do almost play like a high-low game and sort of plug one number in and plug in
Yeah,
another number, and
yeah.
eventually you kind of narrow it down to the range of what it is.
I have a really serious question. Did you get this pen?
What, this,
The stylus, I've been looking around for like a pointy stylus.
Yeah.
what do you have? Do you have the Surface?
It's actually a laptop.
See, this one, this one works or not. Because it may not be,
Oh, 5 of them.
yes, it's not a, it's, that's probably a,
Like this one?
yeah, it's the same thing as like the iPad. They're not, it's a different type of, okay, what's called, something capacitive,
I
whatever.
bought one for,
When I was looking at
probably
it,
a
I'm like, I
surface,
didn't
but
understand
it
the
didn't work.
first one.
Yeah, no, it only works with that.
Are we installing
This will work with
something and then-
any type of touchscreen that allows for the digital
The
pen.
building, you know,
Yeah, because that is, it's a touchscreen, but yeah, it's only, that's why it has like this is trying to replicate what's basically your finger.
and figuring out how much money they
And so it doesn't allow for the precision that this does.
Sucks.
Yeah, I know.
It's cool on this one too, is you can actually rest your palm on it and it doesn't.
Yeah, most of the time it works really well. Every so often it'll pick up something, yeah, some little ziggity zag, but yeah. The one I really actually, many years ago, I guess it was HP had made one, it was like one of their first ones in 2003, that only, it would accept, it was basically this kind of pen, but it wasn't touchscreen. And actually I can prefer that because what I don't really use the touchscreen aspect of it, I just, it's really the pen thing is what I want.
Yeah, you have to do it with the palm on it.
And then, because we have an
Instead
individual.
of swipe over it with the palm. Right.
Well, wait, no, we talked about it.
Forgy, that MIT project, is that the midterm for Kevin's class?
Okay, one more time?
The MIT project?
No, that is just simply the project for his course.
The exam for that course you're doing? Yeah. On the syllabus, you said there was some type of exam for that course.
No, that's all him.
I was with you, right? I really was. For this. For the 3, I don't get what we're gonna do until 5.
No, because once again, you're starting over completely as if it were a brand new loan.
Right.
And so therefore, that's why you only need to go, it's 3 to 5 is 3 years.
Right.
And so that's why we're doing the 1 input 36.
Okay. Okay. Okay, because I think I was looking at it like, okay, 12 times 5.
You're sure, and we're separated into 2 separate problems.
Okay, well, thank you.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. 120, I'm gonna make that shit work. Yeah. No, that's not good for this one. Who was at school? It was boosting this shit, $15 and shit. And go.
Is that true?
And they do post, this is that real estate, he get you right where you go.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Sitting up front.
No, it's just more from,
I have a question.
Yep.
The date in,
No.
staff. You already knew what I was gonna ask.
So which thing?
Yes, I am.
The date has been established, not the time. It
Okay.
is February the 26th,
Okay, it's gonna be the 20th.
and it's gonna be in the afternoon. I don't know whether it's gonna be 1 to 3, 3 to 5.
Okay.
They're still internally debating on that. But we've reserved the space in the room for them from 1 to 5.
Is it like a quarterly meeting that they're just doing
Basically.
that basically?
Yeah, and so, and the format is yet to be defined either, as to whether or not, and we actually have the say-so on this, but I'm waiting until they finally tell me, okay, what is the time? And then I'm gonna email all of you and say, okay, who wants to be there? What role do you wanna play? Because it can be as simple as you sort of show up, or some of you show up, they give you the big check and you walk away and you're done. It could be that you show up and you actually give the presentation live to the group, or that we just have to play the video, which I would just prefer. Personally, I would almost prefer to play the video just from the standpoint of the simplicity of it.
Well, and I don't think Justin's gonna do that, so it's just gonna, it's not gonna be the same presentation
Right.
if we're moving people and things.
I mean, you could be there to answer questions, I guess, and that sort of thing, but, you know, my suspicion, I mean, you know, as a guy who tries to look at it from a variety of perspectives, you know, given that this is, they're not coming there specifically to see and hear for a meeting, and so
No, I sit in on meetings like this all the
and
time.
I doubt very seriously they're gonna be really interested in really sitting through the whole presentation. I mean, I think, I would almost be inclined to say, you know, let's pick the best 2 or 3 minutes of the presentation, play that.
Yeah. That makes sense.
That's my preference, but I'm gonna, you know, survey you guys as soon as I finally get the details. So what the time is and see what y'all wanna do.
I'm just like, I like to go, but I have to like reserve the time.
Oh,
Schedule kind of.
I mean, I'm indifferent as to how we do it. I mean, to me, it's like, it's been done. Anyone who's interested can view it. I think it's great that we're getting exposure, you know, to the program and to the students that are, you know, were involved in it. But I don't know that there's a lot of traction or mileage to really be gained by, you know, doing another formal presentation.
Yeah.
But like, if you tell me right now, I really want to do the whole thing in front of them, and so I can get, you know.
I think if there were 3 of us,
Right.
and we're all gonna be there, I would be much more inclined to do it, but I just think that like.
Right, having a cover for somebody.
Cover, it's
No,
just
I
like
think,
it-
right.
that
Whatever,
was the
whatever our
idea.
project
Part
is
of
for the
reason
MIT,
it was like
we
the
have to
way it
set
looked,
it up
the way
and,
it sounded, and the way it looked.
that project
It's just,
forward.
it's not the same presentation,
No, no,
which is
I-
fine. But that's fine, we can decide later, I guess. Decide later.
Oh, you got it?
Sounds good.
Nice.
Okay.
Right back, I'd like somebody help. Coming up with that.
Do you have an unlimited license on that?
Get the wrong thing.
Huh?
Yeah, you have like, you're up in all 3 options.
Oh, you have to, for next project, I think, the subject that we're gonna do our schedule is on. And in addition to
The
the
MIT.
ones there.
I'm getting a little tired of talking, man.
Dave,
Yeah.
right?
So I
It's easy now.
It's two. It's so easy.
It's easy.
Do it at our age. You could give it to anyone that program, give them like a week and just mess it up. Figure it out. That's the best part about being our age, it's like, give me anything, and I'll figure it out, I might mess it up.
Well, it's Excel. You just gotta know a couple of the buttons,
That's it, yeah, there's a couple things that you do need to know, once it's.
You know what? Too much of one.
Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. Yeah, and I don't, most of the
They made a mistake about firing Tom.
they don't do like, they don't add in valuations, like they don't put in, what job and how much you lost, and how, that's just, dude, that is.
That's cool, I like it.
It is great, what I'm saying, for a year-long project. For a year-long project, that's unbelievably tediously unique. Yeah. That's a whole nother thing.
It makes nice graph though.
Oh, really? Yeah, we don't build a team fund, don't worry about it. literally the first one I said. But I'm like, all right, so what's up with you? Yeah, yeah.
Showed up that one, I think it's going all the time. We're all one big class, next week will be all that.
Like, I know today I'm moving here too. All the five stars. Come on, Dave. Ryan, how you doing?
I know they do.
Okay.
Yeah, but we didn't get them to all.
So, all right, that was, once again, gets us through a couple of things on the just for rate mortgage and then also on a kind of lender participation type of mortgage. Going to now kind of go back to a couple of things I talked a little bit about a couple of weeks ago that I want to focus in on topic-wise. We had talked about constant amortization mortgages. We also talked about interest-only mortgages, and then the traditional mortgage being the constant payment mortgage, correct? All right. But up to this point, I haven't really given you an actual example of a constant amortization mortgage. So let's talk about how they work and kind of go through some calculations. So first off, if you remember, from our discussions a couple of weeks ago, what is a constant amortization mortgage?
Fixed rate?
No, it's not necessarily a fixed rate. It can be a fixed rate mortgage. It's probably going to be a fixed rate mortgage, but it's not about the rate being fixed.
It's the same ratio of principal and interest paid off.
It's the same amount of principal being paid off each and every month over the course of the year, or over the whole loan term for that matter. So, as an example, we might have a situation of where we have a $100,000 loan for, let's say, 10 years. And a 5% interest rate. All right. Now, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and still calculate, just for purposes of kind of comparison, get our monthly payment. Okay, so that would be the normal mortgage, constant payment mortgage, okay? The constant amortization mortgage would be as follows. We would start off with the $100,000, and we would divide that by the total number of payments, which in this case, once again, we're assuming 12 payments per year, and a 10-year mortgage, so that's going to be 120 payments. Okay. Okay. So, with the constant amortization mortgage, our principal portion of the mortgage is going to be a fixed $833.33 per month. What that does is that pays off an equal amount of the loan balance over that 120 months. Okay? We haven't got to the interest portion of it yet, but just the principal portion, that is the base payment. What will be added to that base payment is the interest on the loan. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right, now, the way the interest would work is as follows. Our loan balance initially is $100,000, and our interest rate is 5%. So we multiply that out, it's $5,000, but that would be technically over the course of a year. We have to find out how much it is on the first month or on a monthly basis. So we divide that by 12. $416.67. So that's the interest for, and this is the part that will make your head spin, month one only. Oops. Okay, so now what we have to do, so our month one payment is going to be the $833.33 plus the $416.67. $12.50. So it's going to be $1249.99, or basically $12.50 rounded. Now, take a look at something. That is our first mortgage payment. Month one, that is our mortgage payment. Compare that to our fixed rate mortgage, our traditional mortgage. It's almost, it's basically about $200, almost like $190 more. Okay? So the initial sort of thing out of the gate that you should be saying is, why would we want to ever do a constant amortization mortgage if we're having to pay an extra, $190 or whatever it is, dollars extra a month in order to get it? Well, the benefit is what we had talked about before, which is the idea that you're paying more principal, and you're paying it up front, so that over the course of the loan, what is going to happen is your payments are only going to get less. So this is your payment for the first month, but your payment literally in your last month of, however many, 10 years, will be as low as $833. So it's going to go down from $1250 to $833 over time.
Over the course of 10 years.
Over the course of 10 years. So, now the fun part of this is, well, how do you then go and figure out what my loan balance is, and at any given point in time, and then what the payment is going to be at any point in time? It's not that complicated, but it's logic more than it is math, okay? For example, if we know that we're knocking off $833 a month in principal, and we want to know what the balance is for this loan after 1 year, what do we have to do? Take $833.33 times 12, subtract it from the $100,000, that gives us our loan balance at the end of the first year.
Right.
Then we would take that amount, multiply it by the interest rate, divide by 12, and then find out what the interest would be for that particular payment. And obviously it's going to be less than this because the balance is less than $100,000. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, to find out specifically what the dollar amount that we have spent is, we're probably going to want to construct a spreadsheet and put them side by side. And I think I may have put one, you can look at it, we can look at it maybe later. But effectively, we did a side-by-side comparison of basically a traditional mortgage and the constant amortization mortgage, so you could see how much total interest, how much total principal that you would pay, and what difference would be over the course of whatever the loan term is. Okay, Melissa, you had a question?
Well, that was sort of my question. I didn't know if there there would be a way to figure out the interest without individually doing, you know, each month and figuring out how much interest you paid over a year versus in the other option.
And you can do a very rough estimate by kind of basically saying, taking this number and dividing it by 2, and then multiplying it by the entire loan term, or the entire, okay, take this number, divide it by 2, multiply it by our, brain freeze, multiply it by the loan term of 120 months, and that would give you a rough estimation.
That would be like an average of.
Right.
That makes sense.
Okay. All right, other questions? Somebody over here, I thought? Nope. Okay. Make sense?
So you think it would have been the 10-year analysis workbook on your?
No.
No?
We'll try to find it a little bit later.
All right.
Okay, so let's move on. The next one would be an interest-only mortgage.
So on either one, the effective, like your total overall payments are gonna be the same? Your interest?
They
Your
may
IRR or?
be, they're not, no, they're not gonna be the same. You're probably gonna pay a little bit less in interest on the constant amortization mortgage. Simply because you're paying off the principal faster.
And the interest that principal is applied to, you know, the principal that the interest is applied to is less every time, so
Yes.
that interest payment becomes less every time.
Correct. Correct. Okay.
Because the only day you're paying 5% is the first payment.
No, you're still paying 5%. It's just that
On
it's
what
on a
amount?
smaller loan amount.
Right.
Because your loan balance is decreasing each and every month. We'll build a spreadsheet and where we can illustrate this. Right now, just try to focus on it conceptually. Okay, the interest-only mortgage. These become super popular, sadly, whenever you have an overheated market. And you've got a situation of where prices have escalated to ridiculous levels, and you're trying to make property affordable to the purchaser. Very seldom do you see these with commercial loans, but they do occur. But with an interest-only mortgage, it's one whereby you are strictly charging them a fixed percentage interest rate on the loan, but the balance of the loan never goes down. So that you may, engage in a 5-year interest-only loan, your payment is going to be less, but yet you're not going to end up gaining any equity over the course of that loan. So, as an example, $100,000 loan at 5% would mean you would pay, expel, the calculations are really simple, because even if it's